In ancient times, a great flood wiped out nearly all life on the earth. Only a tiny portion of the population was saved, as they were tasked with starting humanity and the rest of the world as we know it today. Welcome to the Lore Chronicles. Every region in the world has a flood story. I believe there's a lesson to be learned from each one. Today, we're going to look at the highlights of several from around the world. Let's get started. The Mesopotamian flood myth is best known for the ancient Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest surviving works of literature. The flood story is also found in the Akkadian epic of Atrahasis and the Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh. Let's take a look at that myth. In the city of Shuruppak, ruled by the wise and pious king Ziusudra, also known as Atrahasis or Utnapishtim in different versions, the gods decided to bring about a flood to cleanse the earth of humanity, which had grown noisy and burdensome. The decision to flood the world was made during a divine council. The god Enki, who favored humanity, secretly warned Ziusudra of the impending disaster. Enki instructed Ziusudra to build a large boat, providing specific dimensions and detailed instructions. Ziusudra followed Enki's guidance, gathering family members, craftsmen, and pairs of animals to join him on the vessel. As the floodwaters were unleashed, chaos ensued. The gods wept at the sight of the devastation, and even the powerful god Enlil regretted the decision. The flood raged for 7 days and 7 nights, annihilating everything in its path. Ziusudra's boat, crafted with care and divine guidance, floated atop the tumultuous waters. After the floodwaters receded, the boat came to rest on the top of Mount Nisr. Ziusudra released birds, a dove, a swallow, and a raven, to gauge the conditions. When the raven didn't return, Ziusudra knew the land was now dry. Upon surviving the flood, Ziusudra offered sacrifices to the gods. In recognition of his loyalty and resourcefulness, the god Enlil granted him and his wife immortality, allowing them to dwell in a distant paradise. The Mesopotamian flood myth shares several common elements with other flood myths worldwide, such as the warning from a deity, the construction from a boat to preserve life, and the sending of birds to determine the subsiding of the waters. The Epic of Gilgamesh, dated to around 2100 BC, provides a fascinating glimpse into the ancient cultural and religious beliefs of Mesopotamia. Let's look at Africa. Once upon a time, in the heart of Uganda, the Baganda people wove a captivating tale of a celestial displeasure and a cleansing flood. Imagine the creator god Gulu perched high above in the mountains, casting a discerning eye upon the earth. It seems that humanity and their waywardness had drawn the ire of Gulu, prompting a celestial decision that would reshape the very fabric of their existence. Enter Kintu and Nambi, a couple thrust into a cosmic drama. Gulu, the master of all things, tasked them with an extraordinary mission: to build a boat that would weather the impending storm of divine fury. Picture Kintu and Nambi tirelessly constructing their art, gathering pairs of animals, and preparing for a journey that would transcend the boundaries of mortal understanding. As the heavens opened, torrential rains cascaded down, and the floodwaters surged. Kintu and Nambi, along with their diverse company of animals, sought refuge in their boat, which bobbed atop the swelling currents. The flood, a symbol of Gulu's purifying wrath, engulfed the world, leaving behind a sea of transformation. Days turned to nights, and nights to days as the floodwaters gradually receded. Emerging from their sanctuary, Kintu and Nambi, resilient custodians of life, stepped into the rejuvenated earth. The animals, paired and multiplied, echoed the resilience of creation. The flood, once a torrent of divine correction, now symbolized renewal, a second chance for humanity, and the living embodiment of the land. In the aftermath, the Baganda people found in this myth a narrative thread connecting them to the ebb and flow of the cosmos. The story of Kintu and Nambi, set against the backdrop of a celestial flood, spoke of divine lessons and the cyclical nature of life, and the enduring spirit of creation. It was a tale etched into the cultural fabric of the Baganda, a reminder that even in the face of celestial fury, there exists the promise of renewal and the resilience of a human spirit. Asia is a vast continent with diverse cultures and mythical traditions, and flood myths are present in several Asian cultures. One notable example comes from Hindu mythology in the Indian subcontinent, the story of Matsya Avatar, or fish incarnation, found in Hindu scripture. According to Hindu mythology, the god Vishnu took the form of a fish, known as Matsya, to save the ancient scriptures, Vedas, and the sage Manu from a catastrophic flood. The story is associated with the concept of a cyclical time in Hindu cosmology. The sage Manu was performing his ablutions in a river when a tiny fish swam into his hands. The fish requested protection from larger fish, promising to pay Manu for his kindness. Manu kept the fish in a small pot, but it soon outgrew the container. Each time the fish grew, Manu transferred it to a larger vessel until it became a giant fish. One day the fish warned Manu of an impending deluge and advised him to build a massive boat. Manu followed the instructions, and when the floodwaters arrived, the fish towed the boat, carrying Manu, 7 sages, seeds of all plants, and one of each animal species to safety. When the flood subsided, Matsya revealed its true divine form to Manu, emphasizing the importance of dharma, or righteousness, and the cyclical nature of time. While the Matsya avatar flood myth is one prominent example, it's important to note that all of Asia is incredibly diverse, and there are likely variations of flood myths across different regions and cultures. The Matsya avatar story is an ancient Hindu myth, and its origins could be traced back to the Vedas, as I mentioned earlier, which is some of the oldest sacred texts in Hinduism. The Vedas, composed between 1500 and 1200 BC, include references to various myths and deities. The Matsya avatar is likely to have been part of the oral tradition during this early period. The specific written versions of the Matsya avatar myth are found in later Hindu scriptures known as the Puranas. The Puranas, composed between the 3rd and 16th century CE, contain a wealth of mythological narratives, including detailed accounts of the avatars of Vishnu, such as Matsya. I had a chance years ago to spend quite a bit of time in the country of India, and I enjoyed learning what I could about the culture and about the folklore and traditions. And these stories are always fascinating to me. Let's take a look at Japan. In Japanese mythology, there is a flood myth known as the Great Flood of Ubara. This myth is associated with the Shinto tradition and involves a divine punishment in the form of a catastrophic flood. While not as widely known as some other flood myths, it offers a unique perspective rooted in Japanese culture and religious beliefs. The Great Flood of Ubara is mentioned in the Nihon Shaki, one of Japan's earliest historical chronicles written in the 8th century. According to the myth, the flooding was a consequence of the divine displeasure of the goddess Izanagi. Izanagi and his sister wife Izanami were responsible for creating the Japanese islands and giving birth to numerous deities. However, tragedy struck when Izanami gave birth to the fire god Kagetsuchi. The intense heat from Kagetsuchi's birth caused Izanami's death, and grief-stricken Izanagi killed Kagetsuchi in retaliation. Izanagi then decided to purify himself by entering the underworld, Yomi no Kuni, to visit Izanami. However, upon seeing her in a decaying state, Izanagi was terrified and fled. In pursuit, Izanami released a host of female spirits, which caused a devastating flood. As Izanagi tried to escape the rising waters, he reached the region of Ubara, where he built a temporary shelter on Mount Tachibana. To pacify the angry spirits and mitigate the flood, Izanagi performed purification rituals and offerings. Gradually, the waters receded and the land was restored. The myth of the Great Flood of Ubara is intertwined with the themes of creation, death, and purification, reflecting the complex relationships between the divine and natural forces in Japanese mythology. It's important to note that Japanese mythology comprises a diverse array of stories and beliefs. And the Great Flood of Ubara is just one example among many myths that form the cultural and religious heritage of Japan. Now, the Nihon Shaki, also known as the Chronicles of Japan, was completed in 720 CE during the Nara period. While the events described in the chronicle are believed to be based on earlier oral traditions and historical accounts, the written compilation of the Nihon Shaki provides a dated record of the myth. Given that the Nihon Shaki was compiled in the 8th century, the story of the Great Flood of Ubara is at least over 1,200 years old, based on written record. However, it's important to acknowledge that the myth likely existed in oral form for some time before it was transcribed into the chronicle. As with many ancient myths, the exact age of the oral traditions underlying the myth is challenging to determine precisely. Let's also look at the Native American tradition. Numerous Native American cultures have their own flood myths, as well as in Asia and other parts of the world. They reflect the rich diversity of indigenous traditions across North and South America. While specific flood myths vary among different tribes and regions, we'll give a couple of examples. Let's look at the Hopi flood myth. The Hopi people of the American Southwest have a flood myth that centers around the spider woman, also known as spider grandmother. According to the Hopi creation story, the world has undergone several cycles of creation and destruction. In one of these cycles, humanity became corrupt and forgot their spiritual responsibilities. The gods decided to cleanse the earth through a great flood. Spider-Woman warned a man named Tawa about the impending flood, instructing him to build a large reed boat. Tawa and his family, along with pairs of animals, took refuge in the boat and survived the flood. After the waters receded, Spider-Woman guided the survivors to repopulate the earth. The Ojibwe flood myth. Among the Ojibwe people, there's a flood myth known as the Great Flood. In this story, a great deluge covered the earth, and a man named Nanabajo built a large raft to survive. Nanabajo and the animals sought refuge on the raft, which became a floating island. To determine if the floodwaters had receded, Nanabajo sent various animals, including a muskrat, to dive down and bring back soil. When the muskrat returned with a paw full of mud, Nanabajo knew the waters had subsided. He then sprinkled the mud on the raft, creating new land and allowing life to flourish once again. These are just two examples. There are many different tribes and many different flood myths that we can look at. The diversity of these myths underscores the richness of indigenous storytelling traditions across the Americas, of course. And as you may have guessed, I'm very curious about other cultures and beliefs. It's one of the reasons I do this channel. But for those that don't know, yes, I'm a Christian and have a personal belief in the Bible. So out of all these stories, the biblical perspective is one that I lean to. Now, I'm not here to debate anyone about my beliefs here on YouTube. I know as soon as I mention my personal faith, many will be heading to the comment section to tell me how wrong they think I am. And that's fine, you're welcome to do that, but I find it fruitless to debate online. I used to do a lot of that back in the day, but I've stopped through the years. I believe in one-on-one conversations if people like to have an honest debate among adults, instead of just throwing ad hominem attacks towards one another. That's, again, unnecessary and unfruitful. But I think that good, honest, and intellectual debate is profitable, and we can all gain something from it. So for now, I just want to share this last story that I have a personal affinity for, and hopefully you'll get something out of it as well. At the end, we will see if there's a message about all these stories we talked about. We'll look at them together. In the days of old, when the earth was filled with the clamor of wickedness and corruption, the Lord looked down upon his creation with sorrow in his heart. The thoughts of humankind were continually evil, and the earth was marred by their disobedience. Seeing the need for a reckoning, the Lord spoke to Noah, a righteous man among the people. Behold, I will bring a flood upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which is the breath of life. But you, Noah, have I found righteous in this generation. Build for yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it with pitch inside and out. And so Noah, with the guidance of the Lord, embarked on the monumental task of constructing the ark. The dimensions were precise and the instructions were clear. It was to be a vessel of salvation, a refuge for Noah, his family, and the representatives of every kind of animal. As Noah toiled in obedience, the people around him scoffed and mocked at the seemingly absurd endeavor. However, Noah remained steadfast, resting in the word of the Lord. Then the appointed day arrived. Come into the ark, you and all your household, said the Lord to Noah. For after 7 more days I will cause it to rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will destroy everything that I have made from the face of the earth. Noah, with his family and the animals, entered the ark, and the Lord shut them in. The heavens opened, and rain poured forth upon the earth. The fountains of the great deep burst open, and the flood waters prevailed mightily. The ark, floating above the tumultuous waters, became a vessel of safety amid the cataclysmic flood. 40 days and 40 nights the rain continued, and the waters increased, covering the highest mountains. Every living thing on the face of the earth perished. Man, animals, birds, all were swept away by the relentless flood. But Noah and those with him in the ark were preserved. As the floodwaters receded, the ark came to rest upon the mountains of Ararat. Noah with a dove sought signs of dry land. When the dove returned with an olive leaf, hope blossomed. The waters were abating. Noah and his family left the ark, and the Lord blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." Noah, in gratitude, built an altar and offered burnt sacrifices to the Lord. In response to Noah's offerings, the Lord made a covenant, vowing never again to destroy all flesh by a flood. As a sign of this covenant, the Lord set a rainbow in the clouds, a symbol of his promise and mercy. And so the world emerged from the waters of the great flood, a renewed creation with the covenant of God shining brightly in the sky, testament to the enduring grace of the Almighty. Since there are so many stories from around the world, one would think there is something to the idea of a cataclysmic global flood that wiped out most of life on planet Earth, right? Well, there are many people that refuse to see any validity in the topic. But the good news is we are seeing many in mainstream science begin to engage in this possibility. But even if you're not a believer in the global flood or any of these stories mentioned today, can there still be a lesson here? I believe there is. I believe the lesson we can learn is no matter how bad things have gotten, we can always restart. Yesterday is gone. I have no idea what tomorrow will bring, but I can shape tomorrow with what I do today. You are an amazing audience for sticking with this video all the way through. Be sure to check out this next video if you like this sort of content, and we'll see you next time.